Good afternoon. Now, in a world grappling with environmental challenges, there is a beacon of hope. Today, we invite you on this captivating journey as we explore the pivotal topic of building back biodiversity, the role of forests and habitats. Join us as we dive into the untold stories and extraordinary efforts behind this remarkable endeavor. Now in studios, we have Mr. Tom Obonga Okello, the ED at the National Forest Authority, an inspiring force at the National Forestry Authority, dedicating his life to preservation and restoration of Uganda's precious forests. His unwavering commitment has shaped a legacy that transcends generation. We have Ms. Catherine Nagadia, Head of Community Mobilization at Kijani Forestry, bringing us closer to the heart of this conversation. She passionately works alongside local communities, empowering them to be the guardians of their own forests and habitats. And finally, we have Mr. Richard Nelson, a remarkable individual from USAID. With his extensive knowledge and experience, he has become a catalyst for change, driving international collaboration and fostering innovative approaches to protect our planet's rich biodiversity. Now, these visionary individuals, united by a common purpose, will take us on an enlightening expedition, revealing the transformative power of forests and habitats in revitalizing our planet. Together, we will unveil the secrets of regeneration and the vital role each one of us can play in this global mission. This is not just a conversation, comrades. It's a call to action, an opportunity to shape a future where nature and humanity coexist harmoniously. Join us for an extraordinary exploration that will leave you inspired, empowered, and forever changed. Join this conversation on our different digital platforms. I'm Andrew Chamagiro, and welcome aboard. This program is powered by USAID. Good morning, gentlemen and lady.
Good morning, Andrew.
Oh, that was a mouthful of an introduction to the conversation. Idi, I will say Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year to you.
It's an honor to have you here again, and good to see you, Catherine.
That's
Richard Nelson, it's amazing to see you again. And I want to start off with the ED here from NFA. Okello, we want to understand part of the biggest challenges you're facing as an organization, facing the forest as a country and as an organization that is at the core of this conversation. What are some of the key challenges you're facing? Because that will then slide us into the biodiversity conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, and good morning, viewers. I've already been introduced, and I want to say that just give some little statistics. At the turn of the century, that is around 1900, the forest cover in Uganda was over 50%. It is estimated to have been around 52%. That meant that more than half of the country's land cover was under forest. And what I may call it was under forest and teeming with biodiversity, teeming with life, with wildlife. And over the years when the colonial masters came, they looked at this and they noted that Uganda was reached. I think that is why the then British Prime Minister Churchill described Uganda to be the pearl of Africa. From east to west, the place was green. It was a carpet of nature.
Then?
Teeming, yes, teeming with biodiversity. Now, over the years, mainly because of increase in population and the quest for more land for agriculture, more land for industrialization, more land, more needs for forest products, timber especially. Because you see, at that time, man was mainly hunting and gathering. Food was in plenty, wild food was in plenty. You could put your kalo on fire, then walk and catch a Uganda kobe and come and eat with your kalo. But things have changed. Things have changed, and we saw a decline in the forest cover. By 1990, this had reduced from over 52% to around 24%. That means more than half of what we had in 1900 had got lost. And then by 2015, this had further reduced to about 9%. So that meant we had also lost more than half. Between 1990 and 2015, we had also lost more than half. And at that time, I think it was estimated that Uganda was losing about 122,000 hectares of forest per year.
That's huge.
And most of this is the natural forest, which is the main habitat for biodiversity. And what are the challenges? One, as you are aware, Uganda, we have a very high population growth rate. Our population grows at, on average, more than 3% per annum. And we have high fertility rate, and the population is expected possibly to double by year 2050. From the 45 million we have now, by 2050 will be about 100 million.
Does it worry you?
It worries because, one, the more we increase in population, the more mouths we'll have to feed. We'll have more human beings that need food. And currently, we are producing from the soil. Our food is coming from agriculture. And if I tell you some statistics, by 1990, agricultural land in Uganda was 8.4 million hectares. By 2019, it had increased to 10.2 million hectares. So that means about 2 million new area was opened. And what were they opening? They're opening forest. For example, the woodland stocked by 1990 was 3.9 million hectares. And by 2019, woodland had reduced to 1.7. So the 2.2 million, that was woodland converted into agriculture. And woodland is a forest.
Wow.
Just because the population has increased, we need more food. We have to feed the people. But there are other challenges. For example, the challenge of wood fuel, the challenge of firewood, the challenge of charcoal. I think that's why my sister from Kijani is here. They are trying to address the challenges of sustainable management of a woodland in northern Uganda, so that we continue to have the forest, because woodlands are forest. We have other challenges of fires, you know, the wildfires. In Uganda, there are still communities that believe every year you must burn the grass during the dry season.
Correct.
Others are burning as part of the livestock management. They want to get fresh grass. They want to kill the ticks. But others are burning as a sport for fun. You know, where it's coming from? They set fire for fun.
For fun.
Somebody is walking along the road will get a matchbox and set fire and continue walking. Just for fun, because the grass is dry and he's seeing smoke somewhere. He also wants to start another smoke. So that is what is happening. It is one of the causes of this deforestation. And then there are issues also to do with grazing. Grazing, though, mainly affect plantations, not necessarily natural forest. But those challenges, those issues to do with the population increase, issues to do with agricultural expansion. Now urbanization has come in, you know, we are also very fast growing. Our urban centers are growing very fast. But unfortunately, many of them are not planned. We had forest reserves in urban areas. By the way, all the towns had forest reserves.
Yes.
But we are seeing so many people advocating, especially the local government. Local governments are saying, why don't you de-gazette? They want to use the area for building houses.
Oh, yeah.
But these were put purposely to be green belts, and many of them have even swamps, wetlands. So they were put there for purpose of knowing that the population will increase. There will be increase in pollutants in the urban setting, and these forests can be like shock absorbers to absorb them. So because of these challenges and then the reduction in the forest cover, we have also seen reduction in biodiversity. And this conversation here we are having to do with how do we restore biodiversity. And one big topic would be how do we restore the habitat for biodiversity.
That's where I'm coming. Catherine, if I may come to you, the issue of forest burns and covers and the wood fires. We've had a conversation that has been running, if you've been very adequate at following our conversations on NTV. We had former Member of Parliament Dongoto as one of those, you know, campaigning against that. When you go to communities and you engage them, especially in the Kijani Forestry, what do you see? What does our community represent when it gets to the forest conversation? Possibly the media does not reach there to cover these.
Yeah, thank you so much. Morning, dear viewers. When you look at what really happens in communities, you'll find that basing on what really is happening currently, people are waking up.
To what?
Waking up to now seeing that there's a lot of deforestation and there's need for them to find ways, possible ways of protecting what is actually existing and finding ways of creating alternatives that can help them reduce the pressure. However, just like Tom was saying, the challenges are really so many in the community. Like he was talking of fire. The fires in, let's say, northern Uganda are so much, I would call it even, like he says, a hobby. I would call it a hobby. Someone finds it so easy in a dry season.
To light up the
Everyone
grass.
knows a dry season we are supposed to be experiencing fire burns everywhere. And people are like, they even have that mentality that when they burn, it is a chance of them getting rain. I don't know the science around it. But, so like, they really feel it's very okay. And it's something that I would call, I don't want to call it culture, but I would call it that it is something that is part of northern Uganda currently. That much as there are some people that would want to get out of it, some have planted trees and people want to really conserve them, we still have some people that really feel burning is normal.
It's
So,
very normal.
yeah.
And in that very context, can you tell us more about the Kijani Forestry and how you're mobilizing the communities to understand more about the forestry and, you know, the habitants, the ecosystem, how we should be ecologically friendly as habitants as well as the nature we have around us?
Kijani Forestry is basically a social and private enterprise. And we are working with the community to plant trees and also encouraging them to practice agroforestry because we feel this is the way to go. There's a lot of pressure that has been put on the existing natural forests and natural trees that are in our environment, and we feel the only way to go is to make sure that people plant their own trees for the uses that they would want to carry out, I mean to products that they would want to have. For example, I am a lady, I need firewood. Instead of going to the naturally existing trees that are there, can I plant trees that can be able to provide me with firewood such that I reduce the pressure that is I'm putting onto there?
Okay.
I need to construct a hut. That's what happens in northern Uganda. We want to construct huts. We want timber for constructing houses. So can we plant those trees that we need to do that? I need to earn an income by selling some firewood. I need to earn some income by selling some timber. So I need to plant my own trees such that I protect the naturally existing trees, like I don't tamper with them. So basically this is what Kijani is looking at. We are planting the trees with the local community, but much as we are planting the trees with the local community, we have to encourage agroforestry. Reason being, I can't stop the animals from
grazing.
Yeah, we need the animals to graze.
Correct.
We need them to do other things like keeping bees. We need them to earn money. We need, so this, in this life, we need all the living things in the environment. So how do we do it? Is by encouraging people to plant more and more trees. So we are basically, our head offices are in Gulu as a company,
Nice.
but we are working all over
The country.
I would say, moving all over the country.
That's a great conversation.
Currently, we are in 4 sub-regions. That's Bunyoro sub-region, Karamoja sub-region, Acholi and Lango sub-region. And we are partnering so much with USAID, B4R, into managing a lot of regenerations for the trees that are already cut, and also protecting the protected areas, the areas that need to be protected, like the national parks. So how we work with these communities is getting to them. Much as we want people to plant trees, and they really would want to do it, they need the seedlings. And
I hear about the working with the communities, but how are you turning around the mindset? Because I think this is a mindset issue where people don't understand what forestry possibly represent, and you engaging them, you giving them the seedlings, you giving them all this support structure without the mindset changing. I think we are having a little bit of a hard there. So how are you dealing with the mindset shift so that they actually embrace the agenda?
Yeah, we're doing so much of training them, engaging them in trainings, like it's kind of a sensitization, but a sensitization that doesn't come to a talk show like this, a sensitization that goes down on the ground. We meet them in their VSLAs, village saving groups, and then we talk to them, and we're like, we use the examples that are really happening in the environment. The beauty is, when you look at what is really happening today, is getting to what you want from the community becomes very easy. You talk to the people that the reasons as to why we are not receiving rainfall is the fact that we have cut down all the trees that used to exist, and they can see it physically. So they're like, do we have a solution? And we're like, the solution is there, we can do this, and people take it up. It's not that the community doesn't know the importance of the trees. If most of the times when I sit down with them and you ask, they'll give you as many as you wouldn't even think about. But the challenge is we just need to help them understand that if we exploit the forests, we exploit the natural resources that we have, the chances of us to survive is minimal because we highly depend on them.
Thank you so much, Catherine. If you're just joining us for this conversation, wherever you're watching from, we're discussing about biodiversity and the habitants. Going to Nelson, being a development partner working with community organizations like Kijani Forest, we want to understand, why is conservation of natural forests very important to the USAID?
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I must say, it's an honor for me to be here with such passionate advocates.
You can feel it.
For protected spaces for the landscape. And we've had years of experience working with NFA and with companies like Kijani and UA and others to kind of address these issues. It's really an important issue for the U.S. government as a whole. It's been that way for over a century when we started to set aside national forests and national parks in the United States. And I personally have visited many of those in the States, and I personally find a lot of joy and satisfaction, you know, being in those environments. But even more than that, as a development partner, we see the real development purposes for maintaining and preserving these landscapes, these forested areas specifically. You've heard a little bit about some of the benefits, but clearly there's an economic benefit to maintaining these forested areas in the form of tourism, in the form of natural products that can be sustainably managed in those spaces. There is also the environmental benefits that come in terms of climate change. As has been mentioned, we're seeing the weather patterns change. Even this last rainy season, I've heard so many people say it's unpredictable, we don't know what's happening. Part of that is due to reduced forest cover because the forests attract rain. And so in a country like Uganda that is so dependent on agriculture, rain-fed agriculture, that is a place that needs forested areas to be able to continue to attract that rainfall every year. It also helps to preserve watershed areas. So there are many, many benefits for having protected, vibrant, healthy landscapes. And so that's why we're so passionate about working with partners like these to be able to help achieve these goals. I will say that the one party that's missing in this group, this conversation today, is the actual community member.
Correct.
Right? And I think we all agree, and you've heard this.
We are representing them.
We
are representing them.
No, exactly. And I think they're well represented, right? Because you both appreciate that, we do, but it's a combination of the government and the private sector and the community working together to help address these issues. And we as development partners, we try to help facilitate that, to help make that happen, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to find sustainable ways of managing these forests, stop the deforestation. I mean, the statistics that ED shared earlier are troubling. In fact, just over the last 25 years, we've seen an 80% decrease in forested areas outside of the protected areas. And within the protected areas, we've even seen a 40% decrease of forest cover. in the last 25 years. And we need to reverse that trend. And so that's why the efforts of these two organizations, with us helping to facilitate, is really so critical right now.
I hear you. Idi, when you hear what Nelson is alluding to, that the partnerships and the collaborations that are actually working seem to be bringing it to light, the way the development partners are seeing it. But we would like to know, how is NFA collaborating and partnering with private sector players like Kijani Forestry and the communities, as well as the development partner, from the executive experience and all that? And how does this trickle down to the last mile infrastructure of this conversation of forestry and conservation?
Yeah, I want to start by saying that meaningful partnerships can lead to conservation and sustainable usage of these natural resources. Meaningful partnerships. And over the years, National Forest Authority and other government agencies involved in conservation have really worked with partners. In fact, the very partner that Nelson has talked about, the community themselves, we have mechanisms of working with the communities to enlist their support to conservation. Under the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act of 2003, provisions were made for involvement and engagement of communities into what we call collaborative forest management. This is something which was lacking in the forest laws which were done from the colonial masters. Just like under the Wildlife Act. Before, the national parks were not for the local people. Correct. They were for the tourists. And the local people were excluded. And they did not feel to be part, and they waited for the slightest opportunity to attack. And that opportunity came when Amin was in power. They attacked, and some of the species became extinct, like the rhinos, because they were saying, this is our time now to also get something. So really, the laws now, the new laws which were put in 1990s, that was the time, the 1990s saw the enactment of the new Wildlife Act, which replaced the National Park Act of 1964. And then also the National Environment Act came into being. The National Forestry and Tree Planting Act was brought in 2003. So these laws now were pro-people laws, which made provisions for engaging the community. So under the National Forest and Tree Planting Act, we have the collaborative forest management, where communities, a community group expresses an interest in accessing the forest reserves to get benefit from it, to get firewood, to get herbs, to get medicinal plants, to some of them even do restoration, forest restorations. And through this arrangement to date, we have 52 forest reserves where we are having collaborative forest management groups, and we have 71 collaborative forest management groups that have signed agreements with us, and we have given them 56,000 hectares. 56,000 hectares of the natural forest for them to help us to manage. We are managing together with them. They are deriving these benefits. Some are fetching water. They are harvesting medicinal plants. They are put beehives, and they are harvesting honey for their own livelihoods. But they are helping us with conservation. They don't allow you to come and poach
because they benefit
because
directly.
they are benefiting directly from it. So we have done that, and it works. So we are talking of about 9,280 households that are directly engaged in this type of arrangement across the 52 forest reserves. And we are now looking at how do we engage them further? How do we address the issue of livelihoods? You see, one big challenge to conservation, which I did not talk about, is poverty. You cannot conserve poverty and you expect to conserve the forest.
You can't.
And conserve wildlife and
You
conserve
can't.
biodiversity. You can't. Because the poor person will rely on biodiversity for survival. So we are looking at their government programs. For example, the Paris Development Model has come. And under that model, there is the mindset change. I think government...
It's one of the pillars there.
As one of the pillars. Government has realized that unless we change the mindset of the people, then we are not... First of all, we are not going to fight poverty.
Correct.
Because, you know, a poor person may not even know he's poor. So long as he has eaten, and some of them think if you drink Warege every day.
That's it.
It is okay. You are okay, even if you have no food. So we need to change that mindset. I do entirely agree with you. Now, apart from the communities, over the years we have engaged a lot with development partners, and even NGOs, international, local NGOs. One, as part of the resource mobilization, we need resources to conserve. We need resources to manage this. Government doesn't have enough resources. There are so many mouths to feed. So what they give is not enough. So we run to the Andrews,
the Richards.
The Richards. No, I have an Andrew from him who is with me. We run to the Richards.
Yes.
And they say, well, what is it? And they support us. So we have had a number of very meaningful engagements with the development partners. We have USAID for very many years. As I talk now, we are running almost 2 programs with the USAID. One is in the Kidepo landscape, and being what we call the Biodiversity for Resilience project, which is looking at conservation of biodiversity. It is biodiversity for resilience.
Yes.
We are conserving biodiversity to make the community more resilient to climate change, to poverty, all that. And then we also have another program which is run through the U.S. Forest Service. I have a technical advisor from U.S. Forest Service in my office.
Nice.
Called Andrew. That's the Andrew. So they're helping us with the reopening boundaries of the forest reserves, marking them with pillars. We are also trying to develop ecotourism activities, because ecotourism is one way we can fund conservation.
Correct.
And then we have done a lot of equipment for forest monitoring. By the way, we have some drones now. We can see a forest from up. And then we have equipment for even monitoring from the office. You sit on a computer, you can see what is happening.
What's happening in the forest.
In Mabera, yes. So we have this type of partnership. And there are others. The World Bank. You have heard about the investing in forest and protected area management for climate smart development. This is a new project which we started implementing 2 years ago, funded by the World Bank, both loan and grant. And we are looking at transforming the communities. The main objective of that project is to improve forest management and create jobs
within the communities.
So we have big plans. For example, we are talking of over 10,000 beehives to be given to the communities around the forest in the Albertine Rift. That's where we have many of our natural forests remaining. And we are looking at training them to raise their own trees for planting. And we are targeting the youth, we are targeting women to make craft through that arrangement. We have other partners. The wildlife, what we call the Worldwide Fund for Nature. We are also targeting some landscape within the Albertine Rift in what we call the Kagombe landscape. We are restoring forests there. But we are not only doing in the natural forest, in the forest reserves. We think, as I told you, if we don't do something outside the forest, then you're wasting time.
Yes, correct.
Because these people will go in. So whatever we are doing now, we are targeting both inside and outside.
So pushing the boundaries to the communities.
To the communities. Because we want to address the issue of their needs for forest products, but also the needs for poverty.
And this is where I bring in Catherine. With all these conversations you're having with the communities, I want to know, are you giving them alternatives? Because this conversation brings us to the National Agenda of Renewable Energy. And as a country, we are embracing the COP agenda and all that, the proclamations that were done in the COP. Are you trying to introduce this? Because I love the model where they are planting trees for the need they want to use. But in the seasons as and when the trees are just still growing, are we giving them alternatives to these? And if they're alternatives, how are they embracing them?
Kijani Forestry, currently it's focusing on tree planting.
Correct.
However, we're looking at, because the trees, like you're saying, are going to be ready for their production 5-10 years from now. So what happens thereafter
in between
here? So what happens, just like Tom said, one of the reasons that pushes them to the forests or to the natural forests that exist is the fact that there is poverty. So can we look at getting them into doing crops within these trees to provide an income that brings them money to get school fees, to get for their kids, such that they don't encroach on the forest to cut it down for firewood to sell. Then we are also planning on looking at another alternative where they're receiving, in our incentives, they receive charcoal stoves that are energy saving, energy saving and eco-friendly, such that even much as he goes around to cut down the tree for firewood, the stove he or she is using is at least taking a minimal, that it is not so wasteful. Then we're also looking at partnering with other people to help us on making of briquettes.
Yep.
Yeah. So if we're to partner with them and it comes out, the only problem with partnership, just like Tom said, good partnerships, like
meaningful partnerships.
Meaningful partnerships. Like sometimes you partner because we are looking at a community. You partner with somebody and then this person does exploitation of the community and it falls back to you. Yeah. It's like NFA brought these guys, Kijani brought these guys, so it becomes, so you have to be very careful as you're partnering with people. But there are very many people in the community that are doing energy saving charcoal stoves and things like that.
Well done,
but for currently, what we have with B4R is the fact that we are emphasizing so much on giving them, like the ones we are working with on the Chidepo Valley landscape, we are giving them soybeans and then sim to grow in these areas where they are doing, managing the regenerations as well as where they are planting the trees, such that it gives them an income and they stop the encroachment that we are looking at.
And in the recent past, how is the curve going? Are we on a progressive curve? And if it's progressive, what does the future look like then? I
would think, basing on the statistics we have, we've worked with B4R for just, this is our second year. And last year, we were able to plant 320,000 trees within these two, it is just two sub-counties.
Well done.
That's Lapono and Orom. Lapono is in Agago district, and then Orom is in Kitgum. So we planted those trees, and the farmers, what they get out is their own crops. Like the produce is theirs. They decide what to do. If I want school fees for my child, I do it. And then it attracts them to come back and again work with us, such that they are able to get those crops that are enticing them to plant more trees. So which is also, we capitalize on that to make them plant more and manage more.
Well done. Nelson, why does USAID promote, rather how does it support sustainable forest management and conservation? With all these conversations we've had, they're very impressive. I'm very impressed, by the way. But how do we promote sustainability and conservation of these conversations?
That's an important question because it's an important priority for USAID and the U.S. government worldwide. In fact, globally, we're working in about 60 different countries on these initiatives, on fighting wildlife crime, on preserving biodiversity, and on even things like sustainable fisheries, to be able to provide livelihoods in sustainable ways in protected areas. We have been working in Uganda on these issues for many, many years. In fact, USAID has been in Uganda now for 60 years, and we just celebrated our anniversary just a few months ago. One of the things that we have been working on is this preservation of biodiversity. In fact, in the 90s, one of our top priorities was in working in the Bwindi area and the Mkahinga area and even Chibale to help with the Great Apes project, to be able to increase tourism in those areas by protecting those spaces. And that was a success. And so we're hoping that through these efforts and these partnerships that we have, we'll be able to continue to see further success. Now, one of the things that I wanted to double down on is something that the ED pointed out, and that is this community forest management model, which is absolutely game-changing because it is this collaboration. It's actually a contractual collaboration between the community and the NFA and the facilitating partners to be able to allow the community to go in, use sustainably the resources that are in the forest, while at the same time they're protecting it and they're watching out for it and they're reporting if there are issues. And so it expands the eyes and ears of NFA and other organizations to be able to monitor what's happening. And then the community owns it and they protect it. And so that model is one that we hope to see continue to expand and grow because it's really been proven to be effective. The other thing that we've been really working on that the ED mentioned is this demarcation of boundaries. One of the complaints we hear when we talk to the communities is, well, I didn't know where the boundary was. I didn't know. It was just forest. And so we've been working with NFA, with the U.S. Forest Service, to try and be more clear about those boundaries. And so far, we've been able to demarcate about 1,200 kilometers of forest boundaries with about another 11,000 kilometers to go. So there's a lot more to do, but it's started. And what these demarcations look like is they clear the area and they put these posts in that say NFA on them. And they just space these posts along the boundaries so that everyone is on notice that that is the boundary of the forest and it's protected. And so that's been really helpful. One of the other things that we're working with NFA on is a forest management information system, as he was mentioning, that is helping to digitize
the data.
The management of these forests, right? So that you can incorporate satellite imagery, you can incorporate geolocation, you can track things real time, you can have better data management to be able to track changes over time. And so it's really an important system that is being developed and rolled out to help in the management of that. And there's many other things that we're engaged in terms of setting up, working with NFA to set up new guidelines, working with companies like Kijani and even smaller companies, where we've worked with some of these companies set up honey harvesting to be able to sustain their livelihoods. And so we're looking at sort of all angles to figure out how we can work with the government, private sector, and the community to be able to preserve these spaces.
I love that. Eddie, when you listen to what Nelson is saying on behalf of the development partners, it then hits me that all these models are engaging with communities. I'm very passionate about inclusion. Most of the land in this country and, nationally is owned by men. And you're coming to communities where you're encouraging communities to actually plant their own forests. How do we make sure that the question of inclusion is placed on a priority list that matches? There is a lot of patchwork in the communities where we come from. Women's efforts in these kind of models you're doing are not swept under the carpet, but they're rather embraced, and their husbands allow these kind of conversations to thrive in the community for harmonious habitants.
Yeah, if I may say this one. When you look at the collaborative forest management groups, the main players are women.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because it is a need-based approach.
Correct.
We are addressing the needs of the communities. And the communities the people who are suffering
Women.
are the women.
Correct.
They are the ones who go for firewood in the forest. In fact, where we have agreements for firewood, for collection of dry wood, for firewood, it is women. There is not even you don't get men going to the forest to collect firewood. It's only women and their children and the girl child. In fact, not even the boy child.
That's more vulnerable.
So that is what we are seeing. And even these interventions that we are doing, the beehives, for example, we are looking at the youth. We are looking at women, because the women are feeding the family.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some of us men, we feed ourselves and forget about the family.
Very sad.
The women think about the family. So we right now we have trained women's group in making crafts. Women, not men's group, in making craft. We are training in nursery management. Here we are targeting mainly the youth, because we know they need employment. They need to get something to survive on. So to me, I think when we are doing this collaborative forest management negotiations, it is an all-inclusive.
Correct.
We don't want to leave anybody behind. We bring on board the women, we bring on board the youth, we bring on board the men. And we ensure that even in the leadership of the group, it is balanced. We are bringing the men, the women. So if the chairman is a man, then there is a woman, could be a vice chairman, the treasurer is a youth, something like that.
That is
So
great.
it is something which we have learned over the years that you need to make it all inclusive if you're to succeed.
I love that. Catherine, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I will agree with Tom on CFM groups. That's collaborative
Yes.
forest management groups. But the biggest challenge now comes in when this woman, like, she really wants to participate in all the other activities that are happening.
Yeah.
But I recently talked with management, or the local government of Yumbe, and they were like, the constitution says it on ownership of land, but down there, a local woman does not know her rights.
That's the agenda, yes.
Towards land. She doesn't, because what happens in the community there is that you'll find that, let's say in northern Uganda, where a family has, let's say, 100 acres of land, the women don't have an ownership to that.
They just use the land.
They just use the land. As a wife, I'll have that option of having a right to the land if I have children, if I have boy children. If I don't have boy children,
You don't have a right to use the
then I
land.
may not have the right to use the land. And look at a girl who doesn't have a right to land in her home area, and she's also married somewhere where she doesn't even have a right to land. The only advantage is, just like he said, we are free to
Engaging.
use. We can use, and that is what happens. But even it is one of the challenges we are getting in our nursery hub model, where these ladies would want to participate in the tree planting, but the decision on whether to plant is by the man. And then you are finding, just like he says, we also have like 65% of the people involved in the activities are the women, are the youth, and the girls.
So with Kijani Forestry enterprise, how are you engaging communities on this? Because I see domestic violence there. If we don't handle it rightly, if she will go and you know, get the seedlings and plant all these crops as Edie says, and she gets this money, and the man is not part of these meetings and you know, engagements. Now she has the money and he doesn't have the money. How do you make sure as Kijani that there is a platform where they can talk about this as a family? Yes, I've used your land, you're my husband, and we're planting this to make sure that we have a sustainable income as a family. But how do you talk about finance? Do you have those conversations on the ground?
Issues of land and marriage
Yes.
are a little bit complicated
And
in
sensitive
Uganda, and
yes.
very sensitive, especially when it comes to northern Uganda. Most of the land is owned communally,
Correct.
and where the men have
Owned
a
by
high...
the clan.
Yeah, the clan.
And the clan
And that's
is
where you
men.
come from.
And the clan is men. Exactly. So you find that what we are trying to do is just like what I told you. We are trying to use the district local governments to come in and sensitize, because for them, when they come out, because we are a private company, and the moment you start talking about land, people are going to look at it as if the company wants to steal our land.
Oh.
And you'll be branded
Correct.
as land grabbers. So what we do is to like engage the local governments, the lands, like for example, for us when we're establishing our working relationships in the districts, we make sure that the DFOs, the natural resource officers, the environment officers, and the community development officers, plus the surveyors and the planners of the district are part of us. So we now request them to engage and let these people know, but we don't have, our hands are tied up. We can't talk about what people should do about land and what they should.
That's my other job as media, to make sure that these conversations reach far and wide. I'm very concerned about the girl child and the women on the ground. Nelson, what are your parting shots about this as you're having this conversation of biodiversity and inhabitants? what could be your parting shot as a development partner? What would you wish to see, and how best can we plug into that?
One of the priorities that we have as an organization is to try and tap into the local perspectives. And you can see why, right? There's a reason why we're partnering with Kijani. And that's because they know what's happening on the ground. They have a vision, especially as a private sector company. I mean, the more that the private sector can do, the less we have to do, right? And so we have this vision of trying to empower the private sector to allow them to be able to operate, to make sustainable income, to create jobs. In fact, we have a private sector company up in the Kidepo region, Karatunga Tours, Eco Tours, that has set up an ecotourism camp, and they're employing the locals to be able to be a part of that. So they're employing people. Those people are seeing the benefits of this landscape. And so that's the vision that we have, is to try and tap into the local resources that are here, using these local perspectives, including that of government, to be able to help solve these problems. And we're just hoping to try and facilitate wherever we can.
Wow, amazing. The conversation still goes on, because the conversation is sweet and we have not really, exhausted a couple of issues. NTV is actually giving us more 30 minutes to have this conversation. We shall take a break and we'll return with more of this conversation. Stay with us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome back to the great conversation as we're discussing biodiversity, and great thanks to those following this conversation across the globe. A friend of ours in Eswatini is saying that the reason why we are having these all issues of biodiversity in our country, it's human behaviors that are affecting us. And Kobsinje Rose, Climate Justice on Twitter, says thank you so much, Nelson, for this conversation and taking it deeper. And then Chrissy says, can they share more about the sustainable activities that can be done within the forest? This is all online. Kindly give me the hashtag B4R. B for boy and 4, and then R for Richard. And the hashtag is Build Back Biodiversity. Will be in position to tap the feedback you're actually sending to us this great afternoon now that we're having this conversation. Another feedback comes in from Zeal Global, Othieno. This one is based in Kenya, says that NFA and WWFA, the journey starts with the community building resilience and all. And this brings back to our conversation this afternoon. In studios, I have with me Mr. Tom Okello, who happens to be the ED of the National Forestry Authority. I have Catherine Nagadia from Kijani Forestry, the head of mobilization, community mobilization. And from USAID as development partners, we have Richard Nelson. Let me come back to you, ED. One of the questions, rather the feedback from online, shows that human activities. I want us to dig deeper. What are some of the causes of biodiversity abuses and the impacts it has on our communities?
You know, I would say, let me start from the Bible. When God did the creation, if God had rested on day 6, there would be no human beings.
Correct.
Because human beings were the last to be created.
Correct.
And when God created human being, God told man to go and
Take
care, but also to use the resources, these things which were created before human beings. So I think that is where poaching started.
In the Bible times.
In the Bible. It started many years ago.
Tom.
So human activities is the biggest cause of biodiversity loss in the world, not only in Uganda. But because of also our human activities, we are now encouraging a new boy in the block. There is a new boy that has come in the globe called climate change.
Correct.
So because of our activities, we are also now excavating climate change. And climate change is also coming in to finish
Everything.
including us.
Yeah.
Finishing everything, including human beings. So this is the dilemma which we are having. We need biodiversity for development. But how do we strike that balance? What we call sustainable yield, sustainable use level. We use what is available now, but mindful that the future generation will also need it. Because unless we do that, we are seeing some of the biodiversity, some of the species getting lost.
Extinct, yeah.
In Uganda, it is a known fact. We lost the rhinos. I think, you see, when we talked of rhinos, there are different species of rhinos. There is what we call the northern white rhino, and then the southern white rhino. What we have in Uganda now is the southern white rhino, which never existed in the country. Uganda had the pleasure and what I may call the luck to have the northern white rhino, which was living in northern Uganda, especially in the West Nile area, and then crossing into DR Congo and South Sudan. That was the habitat of the northern white rhino. To date, I can tell you there is no northern white rhino in the wild in the world. They're not there. So what we have, I think, are sperms of northern white rhino, which could be probably propagated in a test tube and injected into some mother, which is probably a southern white rhino, and produce a northern white rhino baby.
But it won't be pure anyway.
No, it will be pure because of the egg. The egg will also come from a northern white rhino.
Okay, better.
So this is the dilemma which we are having. So when we misuse what we have, when we overconsume what we have, and by the way, human beings also are becoming greedy.
Correct.
We are trying to get what we don't need and keep. You find somebody, let me give just a lay example of food. Your family, you need 2 kilos to eat in a day. Why do you bring 5? When other person doesn't have?
You're greedy.
So this is where we are having issues now. We are over-exploiting what we have, and yet, this forest, for example, somebody talked about forest there.
Yes.
These are they're the harbor, they're the house. Forests are houses for biodiversity. So the moment you destroy the forest, first of all, you are destroying the habitat. You are destroying a home for somebody, for some species. But also you are destroying the species, because the forest itself, those are trees. Trees are also species with all the other plants which are there. So you are losing them. But in the process of losing them, you are emitting carbon dioxide, which carbon dioxide is coming to the atmosphere and leading to that big boy.
Climate change.
And climate change is known also to be a cause of biodiversity loss. So the circle,
the ecosystem goes around.
Yes, so it is a big problem.
Catherine, when we come to this Kijani forest, how are you working with the communities? You shared a couple of models there, and I hear you, they're possibly working, but are there other more details on how you're working with these communities and how best we can leverage on those models to actually see that biodiversity and eco-friendly habitats between humans and the nature will actually coexist?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Basically, how we are working with the community is through our basic one is the nursery hub model. And in this nursery hub model, like I earlier said, we engage these people right from the ground, and they learn how to do these things themselves. Someone gets to know how a seed can turn into a seedling. How do I manage this seedling in their own local environment? They set up their own nursery hubs locally. We provide all the materials that they need. The seeds are provided, polythene bags are provided, and everything that they'll need. But then their work now is to come in and learn from the parish coordinator who is in charge. We're normally grouping our farmers into parishes to be directly on the ground. So this parish coordinator helps them to show them exactly how to do it on raising the seedlings. However, when the seedlings are ready now, because it is me to find out when am I ready, when is my garden ready. So when the seedlings are ready, we go and now prepare our gardens, and then we are waiting for the rain to come in. So when it comes in, we now take individually to our gardens depending on our needs, and then at that level, Kijani takes on the monitoring at an individual level. We monitor each farmer individually. And this goes on. We don't want them, we want that kind of sustainability. So we want them to plant. If Andrew has 5 acres, there's no need for Andrew to plant all the 5 acres in a go. Because when it comes to cutting down, he's going to destroy the whole bit of it, and we go back to the new boy on the block he's talking about. So here we are saying, Andrew, can you plant 1 acre this year, another acre this year, another, like consistently this farmer is planting every year. And once he does that, even when it comes to the harvesting, he is going to harvest bit by bit. So this will give him an income that is going to come in on a yearly basis, not getting it once and he goes back to poverty. And then all the same, it also helps us who are fighting the deforestation that is happening, that he cuts and then leaves the others to survive. Then what he has cut in this plot, for us, we are really focusing on trees that grow back. We don't do any tree that doesn't grow back. Reason being, if like the farmers are too lazy to go back and plant.
It will naturally just come through.
If it does the regeneration, and it is basically what we are really doing so much with B4R, it's the management of the regenerations, because there are lots of trees that have been cut down and they are trying to grow back, but the farmer doesn't know how best.
In forestry, it is called copicing.
Exactly. Yes. So we are doing that farmer managed regeneration, and they are really helping us a lot. Like, it grows back and we are really maintaining these forests. However, there are lots of challenges.
We're coming to the challenges in a bit. When I come to you, Richard Nelson, let's talk about you know how beautiful Uganda is. And I'm grateful that you've traveled diversely to appreciate what we are. How does this biodiversity conversation, how does the impact of biodiversity, if we don't pay attention to it, how does it affect the tourism industry? Because that is one of our industry that used to bring the money. Eventually, after COVID-19, the entire noise was open airports we need. And if you're not paying attention to this, what are the dire effects on this, tourism especially?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, as the only non-Ugandan here, I can bring that perspective.
Correct, from the global perspective.
As I've traveled around the world and seen many different places and different national parks, I mean, the world is beautiful everywhere. But I must say, in the 3.5 years that I've been in Uganda, I've been lucky to be able to go and see many of the different areas of the country. I've climbed Mgahinga, I've been in Bwindi, and I've been in Chibale, I've been in the other national parks even. And Uganda is a special place. It really, really is a beautiful landscape. And the tourist potential here is much greater than what is currently being realized. When I look at what's available and what tourists might want, and when I talk to my relatives and friends in the US, I tell them about Uganda, and they think, oh, I've never heard of that. I want to come and see, because of what's here. We know from the economic information that we've seen over the past few years, tourism has been the major generator of foreign income in Uganda. And that can be increased tremendously, I believe, but it has to be done through the correct policies. It has to be done in a way that makes tourists feel welcome and comfortable, and give them a variety of things to do. In fact, one of the things that we are doing is we're working with the National Forestry Authority and the Kalinzu Central Forest Reserve to actually build a tourism center with a canopy walk that will allow, just on the outside of Queen Elizabeth National Park, it will allow tourists to come to perhaps go to Bwindi, go to Queen Elizabeth, and then they'll be able to stay an extra day and spend some time at the canopy walk to really appreciate that natural forest landscape with the wildlife and the biodiversity that's there. And that kind of thing is what we need to be doing throughout the country, I think, to be able to continue to attract more and more tourism revenue, because then that will be a real income generating opportunity for locals. We talk about resilience in the community.
Communities, yes.
I mean, the communities benefit from this. When the tourists stay at a lodge, the lodge hires local people. They stop at a petrol station. You know, all of these things those tourists are doing, they're dropping money everywhere, and that is like seeds in the community.
Please.
I think let me add something to what Nelson has just said. Not just getting money from the interaction with tourists, but the communities under the Uganda Wildlife Act. The Act provides for 20% of the park entrance fees, which are paid by tourists, to be given to the communities surrounding the area where the tourist has entered. If the tourist entered Maxon Falls National Park, the money goes to the communities around Maxon Falls National Park. And this money goes through the local government as a conditional grant to fund community development projects. It is not a Tandekwa which is distributed to people. It is supposed to be for community development projects. So that is a direct benefit from biodiversity conservation. But that said, yes, Andrew has talked about, Nelson has talked about the untapped potential we have as a country. It is true, as a country, we still have potential to develop new tourism products. For example, look at Lake Victoria. In many countries, water tourism is a big revenue earner.
Correct.
We need to probably do something to develop water tourism, especially in Lake Victoria. And then we also need to modernize some of our tourism infrastructure, especially roads.
Yes.
If you want to travel from Kampala to Gwindi, for example, and about 1 month ago when it was raining, you may have to plan to travel the whole day.
Correct.
Because you can reach a point, you find the river has crossed the road, and the vehicle gets stuck. So I think also we need to modernize our tourism infrastructure to tap into the potential which we have. Otherwise, yes, the enabling environment is there, the policies are there. We are doing some marketing now. We need to develop more products. We need to build skills. Skills, because tourism is a specialized service. For example, you need very professional guides. A guide can sell for you something and which you are not seeing, but you'll believe, especially when you're in the national park.
Of course.
I can see an elephant dung and describe an elephant, and then you believe that you have seen an elephant.
When I was there, they told me the coffee from the elephant poo is the most expensive coffee.
You see?
I was like, oh, I'm going to look it out.
So that way you cannot tamper with an elephant.
I can't.
You need to protect it.
I hear you. Catherine, earlier on you alluding to the challenges you meet. Would like to know, there's some communities you go to and you're going to face resistance. That's a given because of our culture settings, our religious affiliations, and the belief systems as a country. What are some of those challenges, and how do you go over them as Kijani Forestry Enterprise?
Okay. The beauty I like about trees is that you can never go to a community and talk to them about trees and the whole community says no. So I'm proud to be associating with something that really everyone understands and it sells. However, much as the farmers accept to work with us, much as the farmers accept to do the tree raising, we find that he talked about fire outbreaks. This is the biggest killer of most of the planted trees that we are having, and in northern Uganda it's the worst. However, we are training our farmers on making sure that they create fire breaks and fire lines, especially in the dry season where they don't have anything in the gardens, and many are adopting it, and that helps to protect. Then we also have the dry long spell, and then the unexpected time when we wait to have the rain. This disorganizes us a lot, that the survivors, because our interest is not only the planting. We want to see these trees surviving. And if we're to have them surviving, we need to plan. So what happens there then is that we have put up strategies. One, making sure that the seedlings are ready on time, ready on time. Like we start working with the groups in August, though that one also brings in time. If we're to plant, for example, in March, we have to start working with the groups in August. Reason being, these farmers have their other things to do. You are not going to put food on table. He has to go and do other things. So you need to put that into consideration. Then we are also encouraging them to do an early pitting.
What is
like,
that?
Tom will help us on the scientific bit of it. He pits for the tree to be planted, but he doesn't plant because the rains are not there. So what he does is to put back the soil, he backfills, and then he leaves the pit there. So when he leaves it there, when the heavy rains come, remember, if this soil was hard, penetrating to enter the soil is hard. But when this pit is found pitted already, it stores a lot of water. So even much as it takes 2-3 weeks minus raining, my seedling is going to be surviving more than any other who just pitted on the very day and planted
You
the
have
next
already
day.
explained. This I has you already explained.
Then we are also kind of encouraging them. We have tree species that are resistant to the dry
To the weather
conditions.
changes.
And these are tree species that are within the environment. They are naturally there. They are indigenous there. So we are so much focusing on them. Much as when you talk to people about tree growing and you're talking about timber, a farmer in Uganda is going to tell you, I want musizi. That is Msopsas eminae.
Yes.
That's what they want. But if you're to do it in northern Uganda, you have to be very, very careful because it requires a lot of water. Which water is not available.
It's not there, yes.
So we are trying to kind of mindset change them on accepting that much as we want them to see, can we also look at the other species that are very good and can be resistant to the dry conditions, and then we have them surviving. Then we also have a big challenge of stray animals. In the dry season in northern Uganda and Karamoja mostly, animals are left to move. Nobody owns them.
Just to roam.
Just. They move anywhere. I only remember about my animals when the rains have come back.
And because people have started planting.
Exactly.
Oh, so you don't want to be in cases.
Mostly there is nothing in the gardens in the dry season. So a farmer who has picked up tree growing is facing challenges of these animals coming in. And some of the tree species we are talking about are very sweet for the animals. So like they are fodder to these animals. You find a goat eating Gimelaina and you will not believe it, and the farmer is so discouraged. But what we are kind of doing is we are trying to encourage them to do boundary planting. And the boundary planting is to do a tree that is having thorns to protect them. So we shall now welcome back the animals in when the trees are 2-3 years old. They can now come back and feast, be in. Then we are also encouraging them to also do a lot of fodder trees like coriander, then around, such that when the animals come in, instead of coming in the garden, they feast on the coriander and then leave the others surviving.
That's amazing. Finally, Nelson, this I mean it finally. As a development partner, how best can we plug and integrate the conversations nationally that it covers biodiversity at every layer, that in every program you're having is integrated with biodiversity to protect this conversation, that we can conserve and preserve, at the same time encourage the future generations?
Thank you for that. It's important for us as a development partner, as we look at the range of activities that we're involved in around the country, to take this into consideration. Really, agriculture is one of our biggest areas of focus. And all of this relates to agriculture and its sustainability over time. I guess one of the things that I would say that's probably most important is that the government really needs to take the lead on this. And they need to take a long-term view. It's not a short-term game here. This is a long-term view with long-term policies in place. If you look at climate change itself, since the 1960s, the temperature has increased in Uganda by 1.3 degrees Celsius. And they're projecting it to increase by another 4 degrees over the next several decades. And so we're seeing this increase in temperature. We're going to see more droughts. We're going to see more sporadic rain coming. And that's going to be disastrous for Uganda unless the government can really help to get the policies in place to help deal with this. The other player here, and this is where the government again has to be smart about how they're managing this, is with the private sector. Today we've been highlighting the good things that the private sector has been doing. Kijani as a golden example. But the private sector can also be a hindrance.
Yeah.
Correct.
They can also be part of the problem. And so this is where the government needs to step in and really manage this effectively, so you don't have the private sector coming in, you know, commercial farms or mining or whatever it is, come in and actually encroaching on areas with the permission of the government, right? And so this is where these are tough decisions that have to be made, but with the leadership of the government, with a long-term view, taking into account the interests and the priorities of the private sector and the community, I think that there's a bright future.
Wow. Thank you so much for the great conversation. Time, you know, TV time flies. But it has been an honor to have you, Nelson Richards. Catherine, it's an honor. Believe you me, I will actually come to the ground and engage with these kind of community engagements that we can amplify that in media. Thank you so much, Edie, for taking off some time. And you, the great viewer, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. The numbers are surging of those who have been watching this conversation. We appreciate you. But then the conversation comes back to you. The call to action is you to preserve the biodiversity around you. It's you to actually be very alert and very inclusive in all these national agendas on how best we can protect our environment. This program was powered by USAID. Until next time, I'm Andrew Chamagero. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.